I did put down technology center. Is that because if we're going to support all these folks who maybe live here but work remotely, we're going to have we will need to have a very sophisticated system in place, and probably a good thing for the colleges and some others to get on board, so they're educating the kids that are going to stick around here because they're good at doing that kind of thing. Computer repair, all kinds of services, setting up systems, that type of thing.
Thank you, Lori. Mike, do you have any comments? You work with people who are looking for work all the time, and I think most of them have some skill level of.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at barriers to employment from a technological standpoint, sometimes it is access to internet, especially a lot of employers nowadays are all going towards, online portals and kind of removing that people element. So making sure whether it's, extended hours at the library, or maybe there is some sort of technology center where people can access the internet and different things like that. It's interesting, right? We don't have phone banks anywhere anymore. So if you do not have a cell phone, you are out of luck a lot of times. So that might be something to look into, is some other form of communication or something. Couple thoughts that the chamber had, this is maybe last September. So there was a company that developed this software. They were launching it, pilot programs in some cities in Minnesota and in the Midwest. And it was, I believe it's called the Deets App. And basically it's an app of everything that's going on in the town from an events perspective. Retail, bars, restaurants, everybody could kind of upload, hey, here's our daily special, whatever. And the idea behind it was that somebody could come in, whether it's a local resident or somebody who's visiting, you download the app and there'd be, kind of signposts everywhere to, scan the QR code and it takes you there. And it's your one-stop shop of everything that's going on, and not just the big events too, which are great. Those would automatically be in there. And it kind of started in talks and then it just kind of fizzled. And I'm not quite sure what happened there. I think the initial investment was only $5,000. The company kind of took it from there. They would do a huge marketing and launch campaign, trying to get both users and local companies to get it up and going. So something like that, or other companies that are doing something similar, might be something cool, because again, it drives economic activity. When you think somebody's just sitting on the couch at home and they say, well, what's going on? Now they look it up and it gets them back in the community to spend some dollars locally. I think one of the drivers that we said, well, shoot, we should probably do something like this, is some of the surrounding communities were looking at it as well, whether it's Rochester, La Crosse, up in the cities. So again, how can we keep more dollars here? And then the electric charging stations, I'm not quite sure what happened with Excel Energy. They were also in talks. Ross Lexfold, I believe is,
Ross.
Yeah, and so we were talking, this is probably pre-COVID, but again, how do we get kind of some charging stations locally in town? Even the technology's changed a lot in the last 2 or 3 years of, the idea was if somebody can come, park, go and shop and eat and do whatever while they're going, even if they are just passing through town. So might be something to think about.
And I think that crosses over to our sustainability committee, because part of that plan includes a lot of related to that topic. So anybody, Pat or Doug, we'll go in a row here and then.
Yes, I agree with Mike on both. I think the EV charging stations, the county came and started talking to me about it 4 or 5 years ago. And that was when then we had the first one that was at the co-op. And I know we had, because they had asked if we would be interested in putting one at the visitor center, because that would make sense. Right now, we are losing out on people being able to come here with their electric cars just because there isn't a charging station here. So I think that is something we really should think about, because even the smaller towns are talking about that. And if, cars are going that way, we certainly need it. And then as for the app, that must be the most talked about thing. I mean, we've talked about calendar apps, I'm sure at least the last 15 years. I know between even Lee and I in the chamber, and we've always talked about assessing calendar, but also resources. If people are new and moving into town, how do they get information? And I know time and time again, we have said that our calendar is really focusing on people from out of town, and we couldn't list everything that was local in it because people would be scrolling forever because we have so many things. But then it was also who maintains that calendar. And I think that work and the maintenance issue is a big part when it comes to just doing the app too, because it is more than calendar, it's things to do. And we have so much going on, is where do we go and who collects and who keeps it
Sure.
up.
And there must be just so many different
There are so
platforms
many
out
different
there.
apps. I think I get on a weekly basis,
Yeah.
people asking, we can do this for you. So that would be
How-
a big issue for
Sure.
us. And then the other thing, as we talk about technology, I know just working with Project Find, we've talked about that with all the families that have moved here. They may not have access to computers, but they all have cell phones. So they have done now a resource and for families, in different languages that's on the cell phone. So that's something that we really need to be mindful of too.
Thank you.
So,
Let's see, do we still have? Chris, are you on?
I am.
And
Yeah, but when you're screen sharing, we can't see the boardroom, so I'm not sure if everyone has had a chance to talk yet. So, no, I everything that's been said is kind of on top of my mind. And early in this process, when I talked about high-speed internet, it's because I hear a lot. I kind of get conflicting data and information, and so I'm not sure what I'm about to say is at all accurate. So just bear with me. But there are a lot of advertisements about from the various companies on TV, for instance, for high-speed internet in Winona with speeds up to a gig. However, if you actually live in the center of town, which I do, I live off of Main Street on 7th. My house backs right up onto Winona State, and I cannot get 1 gig internet at my house. It's not provided in the area. They say you can't provide it to you. So the infrastructure for the best internet, for instance, doesn't exist everywhere within the area that we are talking about in terms of the coverage of this plan. So one of the things I thought about asking for was a true speed map of what's the maximum speed available to resident, and it's a different map for residents as it is for businesses. They offer a different package, but for instance, from the various providers that provide high-speed internet in this zone. So that's one thing I think might be good to look into, or whether or not I was just being fed information. But this was for my own house when I moved into it in 2019. I don't know if things have changed or what, but that's kind of where I'm there. And I think from a development side, when sites are being developed, it's just that we continue to understand, trying to provide the infrastructure from our various technology providers in the city, so that we can continue to be an easy place to develop. And then and the other part of that I want to talk about is what we've seen in some cities, and I don't know if it's feasible in Winona, but basically public Wi-Fi, citywide Wi-Fi, that that anyone can log into anywhere. You don't have to go into a coffee shop and ask for the Wi-Fi password, but actually a zone in zones within the city where it's easy to log in to the internet, and it's being provided to the public. So that's something I thought that would be interesting to explore in the future, is kind of creating a hub or a technology area. You can provide Wi-Fi, in broad areas directly
sure.
provided by the city.
You know, we were a pilot project, Chris, many years ago as Wi-Fi and everything was coming about, and we were funded by either Blandon or the Initiative Foundation to put public access for Wi-Fi in the library, at the lake, at the levee. There were a number of spots, but I don't know if we're, you know, up to that next level or not. This isn't my area of expertise, but Jeff or Doug, would you want to share your thoughts?
I mean, I kind of echo some of the stuff that was said, but on the Wi-Fi side too, if it's not economical for the city to do something like that, would it be more economical for spaces to be offered up? I mean, obviously, selfishly, I think of our business as like if we make it known that, hey, you can come here and you don't need to purchase anything to use our Wi-Fi, but even, I don't know if the university would be okay with having a spot for people or just having a hub. I mean, it's not hard to make a spot Wi-Fi available for a number of people. I feel like that would be advantageous for us to have more people sitting in our space. But I mean, that's, I'm biased on that front, but it shouldn't be difficult to have it in other places. So, and it's interesting. I don't know.
Yes. Speaking of technology, Jeff, how about?
Yeah, everything that people have shared certainly resonates with me. And I think when we look into the future and want to be the city of the future, there are certain foundational things that, we can't ignore. And one, as everybody said, is connectivity, whether that's data or the communication, but it's connectivity to each other and connectivity to the world. And that has to occur on an infrastructure. And what that infrastructure looks like in 10 years, we don't know. But it's incumbent upon us to always be asking what the state of the art is. Whether we can do it or not, we should always know what it is. But connectivity is going to be essential to society going forward. The other is, and what's interesting is you see educational institutions doing this throughout the country and throughout the world, is that they're getting more and more sophisticated about creating their own ecosystem. So you go into these schools and they have state-of-the-art connectivity, not only to the outside world, but to within each other. And they know where every student is at any given moment. They know what class they're in. They know what books they've got checked out. The connectivity is mind-blowing. And they're communicating at each other at the speed of light. The other thing that these ecosystems have is an energy strategy. And whether that's in the form of things as simple as how you charge your devices, universality. My wife and I were just traveling this last week, and wherever we went, they had the USB 3s and you could charge all these devices and everything's getting integrated. And so that energy infrastructure, so what it is we do as a community should also be state of the art, so that people can figuratively and literally plug into us at any time, no matter their technology level. And then the other thing that you see is energy independence. You see these universities building solar farms and wind turbines. And if you think about it, long-term stability of any ecosystem is enhanced by having energy independence. And so these schools, I was just down in Decorah. Luther has, it's up to half of its energy comes from its own facilities. Their goal is to be at 100%, and then they'll be selling back. And so here, this institution, and it's one of hundreds, is going to be energy independent, fully connected, and have an energy or an infrastructure that we can all plug into. And I think communities, it's incumbent upon communities to be the same way. As they look forward to be looking at those infrastructures and staying, at least cognizant of what the best is, but preferably at that level. And then the last thing is, if you're not communicating and you're not supplying it energy, you're transporting people within it. And so transportation is another one. And again, my wife and I were traveling, and it's crazy, the technology that exists in transportation. We were in London and you could get on your phone and know where every cab was, every bus, every scooter, every bike. And say, okay, we're going to get from A to B. Why don't we take scooters? Because here are two just around the corner. Or why don't we, and who would have thought that, could be walking through an unfamiliar city and be so informed of the optimum way to get from A to B. And, I don't know what that looks like for Winona, but I know that, whether it's bike paths or scooters or applications or whatever it is, people are always going to need to get from A to B. And if we are a physically connected town that way and operating smoothly, we're all better for it. So those are my thoughts.
Just to jump on board, when I said technology center, I didn't mean a spot where everybody would come and use it. I was thinking of Winona as the Silicon Valley of the Midwest.
Yeah.
So it just feeds into all the things that you say. If we
Yeah.
could have that, how wonderful for us and bring
Yeah.
people here.
Thank you. So through all of our meetings, we know we're getting into different areas, and this was one I felt that we didn't talk too much about. We did talk about downtown development and redevelopment, and we do have a downtown and riverfront subcommittee also. And the city did conduct a strategic plan for our downtown. So we do have a lot of information on that. But most cities, when I'm looking at their economic development chapter, they recognize, and I don't know how many of you were able to see Chuck Marone when he was here, but this core area of your city where your city first started, really has some of the highest value land that there is per acre. So I don't want to just make an assumption, but my gathering from comments and riverfront and historic buildings and redevelopment is that the committee did support downtown development and redevelopment as a component of economic development. And I just wanted to kind of, if you don't agree, just let me know. So, but I felt that was talked about, but not in depth. So, but we do have a current plan and we can bring pieces of that to this committee for information so they know what that plan is. Next, I wanted to maybe pull up, Nick, there's a piece out there that's on, I'm taking notes on the other side of my agenda, so I'm going to steal this. To talk a little bit about goals, objectives, and strategies. So the idea is that the groups will review the information, some of which we provided, more of which we have to yet provide to you, and then coming up with different goals and objectives, perhaps referencing our old plan. We did that when we said supporting all industry is important in attracting new workforce and new industry instead of just composites. That was in our last plan. So that can be a reference too. We don't want this to read the same. However, there might be some pieces in there that might be important. So Nick, there's another one out there that's examples of other cities, if that's okay. There we go. So what I did, Hastings recently did let me see, I got some copies here.
Oh, good.
Might have to share. So what we're showing here, so Hastings recently updated their comprehensive plan, and one of their goals was to make sure that business and industrial parks continue to provide what we need for the city. They wanted a balance of business and industrial sites with infrastructure, telecommunications, and transportation. So that was their goal. And then one of their objectives was to develop a particular business park on a certain part of their city. Of course, they have a lot of cornfields around them and are able to do that quite easily. But that's just an example, just to provide, some context of a goal is very high level, objective is beneath that. And the city staff will come up with some strategies based on what you identify as the goals and objectives. Another example was Fairbolt. Now this one, I don't want to say it's fluffy, but some are written more fluffy than, but Fairbolt has a diverse and resilient economy that supports employment and business opportunities for people of all backgrounds and skills. So first of all, if I were to say that's a goal, I would want to add Fairbolt wants to continue to be, it kind of is a statement, but maybe needs a little bit more teeth. But there they gave objectives is to cultivate an economy and labor force that has the skills, resources, and support structures to help them thrive in the future. And then we have Fairmont at the very bottom with a very traditional attract new industrial users, retail employers, and workforce, which, is good, but it's kind of like every plan says that over the last 50 years. It's not real unique. But they did talk too about promoting development and redevelopment. So before we get into the exercise of writing our goals and objectives, I wanted to just provide some examples so that when you're going back in your notes, that we'll provide a summary of the meetings and what we think are areas that were mentioned that should be a focus as far as goals and objectives, give you some proposed wording, and then ask for your input as well on that. So we'll be providing that packet to you. And Nick has an example here too. There's the template. So we made up this sheet for each of our subcommittees. A goal is a very broad statement that describes a desired outcome. Then objectives are a statement or statements of a measurable result to help achieve that goal. And then strategies, which would be a little bit more staff driven, but please take a shot and offer any suggestion that you'd like. And that's an action to achieve that particular goal. So one thing that I noticed is in our last comprehensive plan, we had a goal called quality of life. And although that's a good goal, I almost think that through our process and input, what I heard loud and clear that maybe should be its own goal, but for you to decide, is marketing Winona with a united front. And part of marketing Winona as a united front is to talk about our quality of life. Sure, we want quality of life. It should really be in everything we're talking about, whether it's workforce or housing or whatever the topic may be. So here the goal, just for example, I wrote market Winona with a united front, including collaboration with partners, including the Winona Area Chamber, universities, Visit Winona and the city, and then emphasizing some of those top strengths that we mentioned during one of our first exercises. And then under objectives, it would be to emphasize the messaging on quality of life related to natural beauty, recreation, arts, and safety. And also presenting that message at a higher level. I think we talked about that after seeing the Eau Claire piece, using images that promote Winona as a safe and happy place with many amenities. So what I'm doing here is just giving an example, of how that might look. And then the strategy would be, okay, let's all put it in our budget. The city should put it in the budget. And then maybe speaking with vendors, creating the messaging that is necessary, to help build that type of unified message that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm. I went one step further and said maybe we should hire someone that could do marketing and grant writing, especially since we're going to be, at least I think we should, when we're looking at marketing, is that not only do we have the entities that you have listed, but we also get our nonprofits in there, our festivals, all the cultural, arts and culture, all those kinds of folks. Because if we want to have a united front, we've got to have everybody out there talking about it. And I don't know what the budget is to hire someone, but if they can bring money in also, as well as pulling us all together. If we don't find somebody else that's going to lead the charge, then maybe it's going to have to be the city.
So that's a good point. We are, we're down a couple positions and we're just in our budgeting process now. One position, community development, is looking to try to get back, is the community development specialist, which is someone who worked on housing grants and other grants as well. It's Nick's former position, and during our cuts last year, that was cut. So we are present at a department head level. I've included in my budget. We'll see how far
Very
we get.
good.
But,
Yeah.
but that's a good point. We do need someone to kind of take the lead. And is that Visit Winona? Is it the chamber? Is it the city? Is it the, we kind of all have our own. I don't think cities are good at marketing, but that,
Not really
I
their
mean,
job.
right. It's I think we learned one thing that tourists like, what tourists like, so do businesses and people who want to move here, whether it's for work or retirement. There definitely is a connection that they want the same quality of life indicators, I guess.
Mhm. Just kind of dovetailing with that, our own personal experience in business is when it comes to marketing, if you can tap in the collective experience and knowledge of a broad base of people. And one of the ways to do that is through agencies rather than hiring a person to actually go out and contract. And whenever we did that in our own case, it paid off in spades.
What's an agency?
Well, you go to a marketing specialist. So in our case, we found people who were in the industry, people who were close to artists, people who understood, the dynamics of the gestation of the purchase process of the individual. They really got in there and they understood what is it that we had to offer that resonated and connected with an unmet need in the customer. And how do you communicate it? Because you can tell somebody a lot of things, but when you show them and speak to their spirit, it moves them in another way. And that's not intuitive. That's not something that most of us know. And people who are in that realm a lot understand it. And I do think that we're looking at marketing an experience here. We're not just marketing a town with assets. We're marketing an experience. Just the way Apple isn't marketing phones. They're marketing a style, an experience. And that's a nuanced thing, but for the people who understand it, or the agencies or firms that traffic in that and who understand it, they're valuable. They're really valuable because they can help with the unifying of the message, refining of the message. What was the piece you showed, Eau Claire or somebody that there again, they said, who cares about quality of life? What does that mean? Well, that means what's the ultimate goal? If a good quality of life? Well, it means I'm going to be happy.
Did we lose Chris?
Yes.
I think so. Okay,
So,
I'll email him to gather his input.
so that would be my add on here is to say, I think we're talking about a consolidated, unified, nuanced image that speaks at a very empathic, emotional level to people to say, here's where you come to discover yourself. It's that kind of place. And that's a powerful brand. There are a lot of people out there who are feeling a little bit lost as to how to raise their family. Where do you go to feel safe? Where do you go to feel that you can self-realize? Where can you go to be fulfilled? And they're not they haven't distilled it down to pure assets. They're looking for an experience. And there are communities out there that do this, and they're good mentors, really.
If you didn't have a chance to hear Mike,
Yeah,
or
I
Mike
was
at
out
the
of
last
town.
meeting,
Yeah,
he
That's why we're here.
wanted to move, the cost of living,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's the whole thing,
Yeah.
and He lived in Greeley.
Yeah,
Really,
and,
Colorado.
Started looking at college towns and watching videos from Visit Winona and
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of it is emotional, right? It's how does the place make you feel when you visit? How do the people make you feel? It's not just the numbers
Exactly.
and the demographics, which are
Yeah.
important. And great start here, Lucy, with this. If this is just your example, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, stamp of approval looks great. We talk about even from like an economic viability of the city, it's not that, 40% of the people are employed in coal. And if the coal mine shuts down, we're out of, business. There's such diversity in so many different industries, whether it is composite and technology, and one of the largest electronics manufacturing hub probably in the Midwest. So telling that as part of the story too, that there are all the feel good parts, there is the natural beauty, it's the neighbors helping neighbors, and there is economic security and growth opportunity.
Right.
One part that we're not, so yeah, total, let's run with this. One last idea on this is how do you get the word out there, or who's paying for it, I guess, right? You can apply for grants. I like where your head's at there, Lori. Do you get the chamber to put some of it in their budget? From the portal, right? Because everything has to go back to some kind of a website. It's not just the video and we just let it float around on YouTube. It has to be some kind of city website. But these almost sell sponsorships, right? The pay to play. Realtors, bankers, local retailers, who's going to benefit? And obviously anybody can choose anybody when you move here, but when you're looking at it and then right there is a link for, oh, this is the realtor, and oh, they even have a house listed there, or oh, here's some of the top employers, and so-and-so Fastenal decided to sponsor part of this. It's just a little bit more visibility for them. When we were originally talking about the concierge program with the chamber back in 2018, I believe, just at the tail end, that was the real kicker of companies didn't want to foot the bill and say, well, every other company in town is going to benefit from it. Why am I having to cut the check for it? And so if you say, all right, you're going to have the visibility, that might be a little bit more justification for it.
It's a great idea.
And then one other thought that we haven't really talked about a whole lot, that do you have a transportation subcommittee also? Something to definitely look into and piggyback with that is transportation to some of these industrial parks, right? When you think our farthest large employer at BCS all the way at the top, from them down to Fastenal, that whole strip there. And yes, they're on the bus line, or at least the bus line's a couple blocks away, but the timing just doesn't work out for most of the off shifts.
And then to Watlow and some of those that are even outside of the city.
Exactly. Watlow, CPI, you have that whole section. You've got the Peerless, Barron's, Windcraft Corridor, RTP. And you almost need to have like two transportation routes. There's the, I'm going to go to the grocery store, get medicine and go to the movie theater route. And it's okay if it takes an hour. And you almost need to have like the express line where it's going from, some central hubs, and it's going out to this business park and it's getting there fast. Yeah.
Route.
Yep. It runs early, it runs late. There's mid shift pickups, and maybe you could almost get some manufacturers to change their shift times if they knew that their people could then get on the bus line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
that's a great point.
One other thing that when we're going to have this vital community is how do we pay for it? And I think if we market it the right way, we should be able to raise taxes, because if you want to have a thriving community, you've got to have some money behind it. And
Well-
that's probably, I'm not sure who's going to tackle that, maybe economic development, but somebody's going to have to raise it.
Well, one of the slides I showed a long time ago, and we have consistently the last 2 years had a 4.8 and a 6.7 increase in our tax base. I know someone brought up, is it just an aggressive assessor? But there have been a couple really big projects that help boost the tax base up. And I mean, just for people's information, it's a mathematical equation. When it says the taxes are 4% higher than last year, that's year over year. That doesn't take into account the actual increase in the tax base. If you grew the base, technically they can stay the same. I have a great example of this on a Port Authority parcel. Value didn't change, county levy increased, city, they all increase. Taxes lower than last year because the base increased. So it's, kind of educating too on kind of how all of that works. But right, sometimes if you're growing, the investments are needed. One thing, we're getting close to our time, but one thing we didn't talk a lot about, and I can do this at our next meeting if you'd like, or kind of ad lib it right now. Industrially, We have a couple acres of land left in the city of Winona for industry to expand and grow. It's very expensive to go outside of the city, mainly because we have natural boundaries and you have to run your pipe, so to speak, 6, 7, 8 miles in order to serve, you know, a heavy duty industrial user who needs water and sewer. So there's this kind of balancing act between, do we have enough land? I would say no, maybe for a few years. But you don't want to invest in infrastructure until you have a user who can help pay for it. It's kind of really a catch-22. But most people do have in their plans something about making sure we have industrial land available. Now, that can also mean taking a site that isn't very highly used right now, or a company moves out, like the candy company a few years ago, and another user comes in. It's about both recycling and kind of keeping in your mind, where is that corridor? So, and maybe that's something we could talk a little bit more about, but I often look at maps of the city, and when I see really big areas where there's water and sewer, and this is kind of maybe a little bit more land use, I think, could we make that available for another, you know, okay, airport, nope, we need it, I know, but you know, truck driving area at the tech college, I know we need it, and I know they built, but you know, when you see these spaces, it is one of the more affordable ways to have industrial sites available. Our land use committee and planning department, we're looking closely at every little piece everywhere. So we do have an inventory of sites that are usable, but perhaps in the long-term plan, we do have to also look outside of our boundaries if in fact we have great growth. So just a couple thoughts.
Yeah.
I don't have any specific thoughts, but just a general one is that as land gets repurposed, its value changes, of course. And, you know, I think we have a lot of land, or if there's a fairly significant amount of land in Winona that may be underutilized its future potential. One is riverfront, you know, it's really valuable land. And, you know, a lot of it might be fairly dormant industrial type of things. And I think going forward, there should be some process by which we're evaluating to say, are we getting the highest rate of return out of the land that's there? And if it's sitting dormant or it's underutilized, to explore ways in which we say, you know, let's take the land within the city limits and maximize its utility. And that utility might be financial, it might be qualitative from a park standpoint, or a bike path down the dike, you know, any number of ways to ask the question, is this providing the greatest possible utility to the city or to the population? And, you know, just your example of the truck park, you know, it's a lot of good land out there. Who's it benefiting? Well, it's a small population that it benefits, and you could probably go up on the bluff there, the interstate.
And I don't want to, you know, make that really known that I said that, but I do.
No,
But when you get the map out and you start looking, you know, another one, riverfront, I'll say, you know, just because we're trying to get easements right now for our riverfront path, you know, you have Bay State, you have Excel, you have US Fish and Wildlife, you have Michael's Lighting, and some of those zoning districts are industrial, but in our last comp plan, they said, oh, they can be future other uses. I think we're a little bit closer to that now than we were obviously back then. And right now, with all of the highlighters available in the entire community development department, Carlos and Luke are going through parcel by parcel and just kind of looking at pieces of land and what the potential future zoning could be, so that we can take advantage of that. So you have an example of goals and objectives. We'll give you some summary. What do you need from us at a staff level in order to take a shot at writing some goals and objectives And of course, we do have a consultant hired to do the comprehensive plan. And part of that work is they will definitely massage, modify, add to what the messages we're trying to say. So you don't have to get too elaborate. But if you can, basically come up with that after we'll give you more summary of notes and categorize them a little bit better. So you have something to go off of. So.
One thing I thought about when I was going through this is consolidating, because we have so many subcommittees and so many different parts of this plan, and it's been that way. Even the last one was that way. How can we think outside the box a little bit and look at, so even under partnerships, I thought, well, let's not do that. Engaged workforce. So we're looking at retention, we're looking at housing, we're looking at our opportunities to advance, the synergy with the colleges and on-job training and the tax base to support it. Flex time, equitable time, all these things that we need to visit with businesses about. Childcare, health, schools, that's all quality of life too. Is there, I mean, I've never worked on a comprehensive plan before, but could you have fewer broad concepts with a number of sub-concepts under it, so people get a sense more of, I mean, if you just look at housing where you think, okay, homes, you're looking at transient housing sometime, or not, is that the right word? Intermittent housing, let's say, for people who come in is a better word. Transportation, what does that mean? Well, you say, okay, well, we need workforce transportation and we need going to the grocery store transportation, but it's still quality of life, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, it's just something I was thinking about. How can we consolidate, make this more user friendly so people truly understand what's going on in this plan? And then let's do something so we get rid of the plan. Because we've done it. We've done everything that's on that plan.
We're 90% through on the 07.
Yay,
That's
good.
why we did a new comprehensive plan.
Yeah, so that's
And this,
wonderful.
this riverfront path is one of the last ones that we're getting it done.
Pound our fist.
But
Anyway, just my thinking, but
thank you, Lori. And I mean, we're very open to other ideas. There is a chapter at the beginning, but if you live in a metro, any suburb, including Hastings, they're all plans, they're all 2040, because they all have to do it every so many years. They do lay out the same with different chapters, with different input and people, but I know what you mean. The beginning part of the plan is kind of an all-encompassing piece that talks about our city, industrial riverfront, but transitioning to, other types of use, the diversified tax base. So a lot of that will be in the beginning part of the plan. But I know what you mean. There's so many areas that are crossing over right now. Carlos and I spoke about it today. Housing, it's on about 5 different subcommittees right now.
Mhm.
Childcare is on 3 subcommittees. Transportation is kind of woven through all of them. Equity, technology, the ones that we're trying to keep in our mind as we go through. There's so much, overlap, and that's telling us something that it all kind of works together. So that's a good point. I'll mention to them and to Jeff, our lead at our consultants.
So how does this all fit together at the end, for the end product, when we're all done with this? Do the different committees all come together and basically this is what was picked from the different committees to be an overall goal for the city? Or is like, hey, the downtown area thinks that transportation is a big idea, but also so does economic. Like kind of on the same vein as Lori is. how does
So
it
the
all-
idea is the goals and objectives will need to be done and provided to the steering committee. Remember, there's a steering committee. And they'll be looking at all of the different subcommittee goals and objectives. The consultants putting together the data on all of our transportation. There's so much data now with technology that they can gather, workforce, all that. So this all kind of comes together. It goes to the steering committee for review. There is a draft plan that's kind of a little bit messy, but developed in some format. And then we go out and have sessions for public input. We invite people in, we go out to different areas in the city to try to gather input on that plan. To see if, for example, this committee is on the right track or not compared to what others think. So the draft plan is done, goals and objectives done by September, then there's a draft plan, then there's different open houses, public input
Wow.
to come up with a more final draft, but ultimately it goes to the planning commission and the city council for approval.
So then in my mind, like, in order for us to come up with goals that are most effective for the economy of Winona, we need to then pick those big things, and in those small things, pick the goals that we're trying to get. Because we want, hopefully, that to resonate with what the other group said. So then the steering committee is like, this is a big deal.
Yep.
Where obviously, you know, stuff that we've brought up where it's like, hey, we don't have resources for small businesses. I don't know how to do taxes. We should do that. That kind of is like, let's work on these bigger issues first, like get the transportation, get the technology that we need in town. The quality of life we've talked about is kind of a broad process, but let's work on these big things that the other committees are also going to talk about so that it becomes a major goal for the city of Winona.
Exactly. That steering committee will hear what the overarching themes are for each particular committee, and there's going to be some, you know, lights going off that this is clearly, and I know one will be housing. That just continue to hear about, but that's
Is there an
a
easy way
great way to put it, Doug.
Is there an easy way for us to understand, maybe there are ideas, to understand what everybody else is talking about? Because if I see that there's a similar thing on everybody's, you know, plan, I mean, we could also say we need to hit on that too, so that we make sure it's a big part. Or should we, hey, let's bring up a secondary or tertiary thing to say like, but we also want this to have some impact as well.
So each of the subcommittees has information on the
Yep.
website, right? Their meeting agendas, their meeting notes. Now, Nick and I are really great at housing and economic development. I must pat him on the back because our notes are out there. Everybody can read them. You can government accessibility. Their notes are out there. That's about communicating better and getting better input and getting more people interested in public office and things like that. So you should be able to go on the webpage and see all that. If you don't see it and you want, we can gather the notes too and send them to you in summary form. So
Kind of follow up on your example there with, say, like a small business solutions center or something to help entrepreneurs out. Even if that's not, it's not being brought up in the housing subcommittee that I staffed. For economic development, though, I
Right. Right.
I really wouldn't care if it's in 2 or 3 other subcommittees.
Right.
Now, maybe in economic development, make the note of tying it in to housing, that housing is an economic driver without additional adequate, safe, standard, decent housing. Our workers, employees don't have a place to live.
We all have no workers.
Place to live.
Yeah.
That's all those two, you know, you can tie that in with that, which then that'll be seen by the steering.
Sure.
You know, the other part about when Lucy brought up housing, just, everybody in the group knows housing is a big deal for economic development, but whenever staff, we communicate and talk, it was land use. So we have that conversation in terms of housing, don't say with housing, economic development. So when we started at a staff level, we started hearing these overarching themes coming from different subcommittees. We introduce those ideas to the other sub.
Perfect.
Like say, for example, the housing land use brought up underutilized space. Yep, let's use that infill. Oh, let's define that underutilized space. Is it parkland that doesn't have a piece of park equipment on it, but it's parkland? Is it one of our golf courses like in the US that does not make a profit? Let's have those conversations. What goes there? So you gotta trickle those things in.
Sure.
and I agree, there's many things important in economic development that we hope won't get lost, and that's part of what the charge of the the committee is, here's an example of housing. So right now, let's say you live, I can't say not Valley, that's all three. You live in a area of housing in R2 zone, okay? And let's say you'd like to add on to your house or rent to a room or have your mother-in-law come and live with you, or even make a duplex. Maybe someone coming to Winona wants to start out and they don't have a lot of money and they want to buy a house, kind of split it, rent a room out, or have their mother live with them. There's so many rules and regulations regarding our zoning that don't allow that to happen. And so one thing that we're really doing with this plan is saying density is a key. Maybe not every house should be a duplex, but more of them could be, or you should be able to have a quarters of above your garage or an accessory use. So we're definitely looking at different ways that we can provide more affordable ways for people to enter the housing market, you know, and that's going to be a key to helping solve the housing problem. It's not going to, part of it's buying up land and doing really big housing subdivision, but that'll happen. But it's the missing middle that we need to really take a look at. So
What I see, I mean, it affects my work every single day, but it's the lack of people, right? And so I know Carlos had mentioned, I think in the beginning of the plan of, you know, some models are suggesting that we'll get 1,000 people, you know, in the next 20 years. And I think Steve Young brought up, well, how are we going to do that if we're not doing anything about it? And it's great that all these subcommittees are reasons why our population should grow. But I feel like this committee is the one that can tell the story of, okay, this is all the great reasons. And like, we should be a recruiting committee, right? This is, if everyone else is going to take care of the hard work of why someone should want to come here, let's tell the story of why they should.
right.
I really think we got a great start with this idea of that's the clear message that we're sending out there.
That's great. Tell your story.
And I know there's dozens, if not hundreds others like it. Yeah. No.
So our next meeting is at 4 on the 4th. That's easy for
Oh,
everyone to
good.
remember here. So, but we will send out a notice. And in the meantime, we'll have time now to do some summary notes, put some things together and get it out to you. And continue on our charge, I guess. So,
Yeah. Oh, one question before we go. I was back looking at the core values and I still like them and I think they're still the same, right? Have they changed at all? The livability and well-being, environment and recreation, entrepreneurship and economy, and learning and culture. So those are the 4 main values that we all are embracing, all of the subcommittees.
well, the subcommittees are all embracing equity, sustainability, and technology. The 4 ideas on the upper left of my little box thing that I did last time, that human capital, housing, small business startup, industry, and diversity, that's what the engagement group engaged Winona when they went out to gather input from the community. So that is a tool for us to say, here's what the community through 2,000 different interviews, here's what they think is important.
Okay.
So,
And then could you define sustainability? Because to me,
no, I'll
it
let
means-
someone else.
Yeah, you're tired. I'm sorry, but sustainability to me,
It's so many.
so it can continue on
That's a very good example. It doesn't just mean
right now.
green. You know, it has such a bigger meaning, but I think people tend to think of it more environmentally than it should be able to sustain itself in the future.
Gotcha. So no, just, for this year only. We
Right.
wanted something going on till what, 2045?
So for example.
Gotcha.
for, Say fiscal sustainability, you start looking at the corridor to go up to 90. Doesn't matter to me if it's housing use, commercial use, what is that investment that we have to make to run up the hill? And when we get a payback, if we ever,
Okay.
if we get paid back in 30 years with enough to be able to, 30 years be able to maintain, make repairs as needed to that infrastructure. So that's another angle of sustainability, just not the environmental side of things. EV charging, green construction, density, the public transportation, so we have less city driver automobiles. It's also the physical side of it. there's gonna be an expansion geographically of our boundaries. And how do we do that? in a sustainable
How do we pay for it?
also?
So we all know, if we go in, you don't want to go to the farthest area. You want to do this gradually in a good financial way so you can get payback on your utilities.
I'll have fun defining that at the beginning of this whole plan. Thank you for helping me out on that because I was getting a little bit confused as to what we were sustaining here.
No, those great questions.
Lori, there is the Regional Sustainability Development Group that's coming to Winona in July. I'm speaking on a panel for that on tourism sustainability and pivots and challenges and resiliency.
Is this the one with the extension that's coming on the 29th?
Yeah. 28, 29, yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Yeah,
Feel free
thanks.
to email either Nick or I with any other ideas.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your first goal.
I think I can do this.
Go.
Oh, the TV's, there we go. That's okay. Thanks for making time, everyone. Thank you.
This is just kind of what I put under read the microphone. Well, I'm just gonna put
I shut it down, Nick.
I think it's still recording.
Oh, how do we?
It's okay, we're always.